Hey everyone, welcome back to Psych 485 for another chapter. Today we'll be going over Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is a bit shorter and I think a bit more direct and straightforward than the rest, so we'll probably run a little shorter than usual. Alright, let's get right into it. So Chapter 4 is about defining performance and choosing a measurement approach. So we'll be defining performance, looking at the different determinants of performance, the different dimensions used to evaluate performance, and approaches to measuring performance that different organizations may use. Different approaches might be better in different situations, and we'll look at some of those different situations and those different approaches to measurement and evaluation. So what is performance? Well, performance is what employees do. It's usually based on behavior. We'll see later in this presentation that sometimes organizations will base performance on something else, but it's recommended that organizations base performance on behavior, and in fact, it usually is. And the technical definition of performance has something to do with behavior. So behavior is most commonly associated with performance. That's what you think of when you hear performance, or what most performance experts think of when they hear performance. They assume that you're usually talking about behavior. So performance is not, like I said, results or outcomes. Performance is usually measured by behavior, not results or outcomes, not what employees produce. Okay, so we're focusing on the process, the actions when we're looking at performance, not necessarily the result or the outcomes. Now, that's not to say that some organizations do focus on results or outcomes. That's not to say that some organizations do not focus on results or outcomes. Certainly some do. But really, our definition of performance, our real definition of performance, technically refers to behaviors, not necessarily results or outcomes. Okay? So behaviors can be negative, neutral, or positive. So they're either taking away from the organization's success or the organization's growth, the organization's overall success. They're neutral. That means they are not affecting the organization in any way, negative or positive. Or, of course, they can be positive, which means they are contributing to the success of the organization, the growth of the organization. And behaviors are multidimensional. Okay, they can be evaluated in different ways. They can be looked at from different perspectives, and there are many different kinds of behaviors that we can look at and evaluate to infer performance. And we'll look at some of those different methods, those different types of behaviors today. So let's back up one slide. One more note I wanted to mention, that behaviors are not always observable or measurable, and we will get into that in the later slides, something we call contextual behaviors. Let's move now to determinants of performance, and I really love this representation of performance, the way it's conceptualized here. You can see declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge and motivation. So we'll define these terms a little bit in the coming slides, but this serves as a good overview as to how these three factors contribute to our conceptualization of performance. So we have declarative knowledge times procedural knowledge times motivation, and I love this representation because basically we have a multiplication problem here. So what happens when one of these aspects is non-existent, or is a zero? If there's no motivation, or if there's no, or if an employee has no procedural knowledge, or if the employee has no declarative knowledge, what if we have a zero thrown into the mix here? Okay, technically, hypothetically, say we have an employee who has zero motivation, but that employee is very knowledgeable, very high procedural knowledge, very high declarative knowledge, but this employee has zero motivation to do his or her job. What is that employee's performance going to look like? Well, if we know the rules of multiplication, that performance is going to be zero. If motivation is zero, it's going to, clearly with multiplication, the outcome is going to be zero. So I just think this is a really cool representation that shows you that if any one of these three aspects is not there, if it's non-existent, if you're not fostering any one of these three aspects, it's going to bring down the overall performance of that employee. The performance is going to plummet to almost non-existent. I just think that's a really cool representation. Okay, so now let's define these three terms we have here: declarative knowledge, procedural knowledge, then we'll get into motivation. So declarative knowledge, this is information about facts, information about labels, principles, and goals. So with declarative knowledge, you're understanding the requirements of a certain task or a certain role within an organization. So you understand the requirements. You understand what you have to do. You basically understand the underlying facts and principles of your task or your job role. Okay, this is what declarative knowledge refers to, and then we move into procedural knowledge. So procedural knowledge refers to knowing what to do and how to do it. So this is also referred to a lot as process knowledge. So knowing the process that it takes to achieve a certain goal or to do a certain task. Okay, so with procedural knowledge, it's what to do and how to do it. Okay, so skills that employees usually have that's seen with high procedural knowledge. Some of those skills and attributes are cognitive ability, physical ability plays into this, knowing how to do something physically, perceptual ability, being able to understand a big picture goal or task and see how the process fits into achieving that goal or completing that task. Motor, again, this is similar to physical skills, knowing how to physically do something, how to move your body to accomplish a certain goal. And interpersonal skills, so knowing who to talk to, knowing how to talk to people. These are all skills that contribute to high levels of procedural knowledge. Now let's move into motivation, that third aspect of that performance equation that we looked at a few slides ago. So motivation has to do with choices. Okay, when somebody has a choice of whether or not to do something, to work towards a goal or complete a task, they decide how much effort they want to expend, the level of effort that they want to put in, and the persistence of the effort, how long they will put effort in until they decide to stop and it's not worth it. So really motivation is just an individual's choice to do something, how much effort they're going to put into achieving that thing, whatever it may be. Okay, this is how we define motivation. And with motivation, a good point to remember is that deliberate practice leads to excellence. Okay, so deliberate practice, being willing to put the time in, put the effort into something, that's going to lead to excellence. Okay, but it's not always that easy. People don't always succeed on the first go around. So it's this willingness to deliberately practice something, to put a lot of effort into something, to be willing to fail, that leads to excellence. Okay, so how to sort of incite this, how to bring this out in employees, how to foster their willingness to put in practice, to put in effort, to be willing to fail, to be willing to do something and not be so good at it at first, and over time work up to being successful. how to inspire that in employees is very important, and that's basically that's how we conceptualize motivation. Okay, so with practice, you are during the practicing process, employees are going to want to focus on what is happening. What are they doing? Let's look at that's that procedural knowledge, right? Is it right here? Yeah, that's that procedural knowledge, knowing what to do and how to do it. So during deliberate practice, employees want to focus on what they're doing, how they're doing it. Okay, so they can better make adjustments and make the right adjustments to meet the goal or do the task successfully. And usually within an organization, there's somebody there to provide feedback. Okay, feedback from expert sources. That's something we've been talking about since the beginning of class in performance management systems. Being able to get that feedback from expert sources to tell you what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, how you can better practice, how you can better achieve your goals. This is very important for raising motivation. Okay. All right, let's move on. Okay, addressing performance problems. All right, so like we were talking about with motivation, employees don't always succeed. No, I mean nobody succeeds in everything they do the first time. So how to accurately assess performance and gather information to identify, or gather enough information to identify the source of the problem is very important for managers and supervisors. So what exactly are employees doing wrong? Where are the points of failure in their attempts to achieve a goal or to complete a certain task? Where we need to collect information so we can see where these points of failure are, so we can better provide feedback and maybe better design a training program, better design a performance management system. Okay, so gathering information about problems in performance is extremely, extremely, extremely important. Okay, so to do this, really, performance management systems are really the best way to collect this type of information. We've been talking about this the whole time, how employees and managers, it should be an open dialogue between them. Employees should have a lot of ownership in the process. They should be able to state, where they are having difficulties, if they need something from the manager or from the organization that's not being provided. So this is where performance management systems come into play for gathering information about performance problems and then developing some kind of solution. So with performance management systems, we're measuring performance, and then again, it's a place where employees can provide information on the sources of their problems to the managers, or maybe the managers are administering some test to the employees that the employees fill out, and then the managers can then analyze that test and see where the deficits are, see where the gaps are. Okay, whether it has to do with declarative knowledge or procedural knowledge, or is it a motivation problem, right? So we're seeing where the source of the problem is, where the gap is. Okay. Okay, let's move on. All right, so we have our characteristics here, our individual characteristics, and we went over this in a few slides ago. The procedural knowledge, the declarative knowledge, and the motivation. Those were our three pieces of that equation that leads to performance. But what wasn't included in that equation were external influences. So HR practices that somehow influence the employee's behavior. They may restrict the employee's behavior in some way, or they may even provide a benefit to the employee's behavior in some way. We're not sure. Maybe HR is providing some kind of incentive to the employee that's raising motivation, or maybe they are providing a really fantastic training program that's really increasing an employee's declarative and procedural knowledge, and thus increasing performance. So HR practices definitely have a lot of influence on performance, and the work environment too. So the work environment can really be anything from internal to the organization. So it could be the politics within the organization, or again, some type of organization-wide reward system, or it could be outside the organization. So it could be law, some kind of law that's some kind of legal aspect that's influencing employees' behavior. That could either be restricting or providing a boost to some type of behavior. Okay. Let's move on to performance dimensions. Okay, so this is actually a very important part of performance and behavior, motivation. So we want to look at performance dimensions. All right, so there are two main performance dimensions that we're going to look at. There's task performance and contextual performance. Okay, so task performance are activities that, our text defines it as activities that transform raw materials into resources that can help the organization, that provide a benefit to the organization. Okay, and these activities, they help with the process of replenishing resources in some way. This is all task performance. Distributing resources in some way, or making resources more readily available among the organization, or supporting certain employees with resources. And what do I mean when I say resources? Well, that could be anything from staffing, from manpower. It could be money to fund a certain project. Achieving, task performance could be, writing a grant that gets the organization a lot of money from the government or something to that effect. So task performance directly contributes to the spread of resources among the organization. Okay, the replenishing, the distributing, and the supporting that happens with resources within the organization. And contextual performance is going to refer mostly to behaviors, and these behaviors contribute to the organization's effectiveness, and they provide a good environment in which task performance can occur. So contextual performance is really providing a boost to task performance. They make it more likely that employees, let me start over. Contextual performance makes it more likely that employees will engage in effective task performance. Okay, and these contextual performance behaviors are fairly similar across jobs. They're not really likely to be prescribed or laid out in a job description. Okay, they're influenced a lot by the individual. So influenced a lot by the individual's personality, how willing you are to go above and beyond your job description to help the organization. That's going to play a lot into how much contextual performance that you engage in, or how much contextual performance that you achieve. So again, these are these sort of extra role, extra job, outside of your job description behaviors that contribute to the success of the organization. And so again, we can contrast these to task performance. These vary widely across jobs, where contextual performance is fairly similar across different jobs. Task performance varies widely across jobs because, as you can imagine, task performance refers to those really specifically laid out tasks and duties that are laid out in your job description when you join a company. So these are prescribed by the organization. These are the task performance refers to the things that an organization or a manager or a supervisor tells you that you have to do to perform the job. These are these things that you have to do to perform your specific job effectively. Okay, and these are more influenced by your abilities and your skills rather than contextual performance, which is influenced by your personality. Okay, so why do we want to include task and contextual performance? Why don't we just include task performance, those aspects of performance that relate directly to the specific duties and the specific tasks that are laid out for us in a job description? Why don't we only look at that? Why do we look at these extra role, these outside of your job description behaviors that contextual performance refers to? Why do we look at that? Well, there are a few reasons here. Global competition, customer service, teamwork, employee perceptions of performance management, supervisor views, and cultural differences. Basically, these different points here are referring to is that even the same job can look a lot different in different situations. Um, so and some jobs are really hard to measure just by looking at task performance. So if you look at a job like customer service, um, maybe we have somebody working in retail whose job is to set up the store, fold clothes, put the clothes on the racks, ring people up at the register. But and those are there. If we were solely looking at task performance, we would just look at those actions, the folding clothes and the putting it up on the racks, ringing people out. But if we're also looking at contextual performance, you can imagine how employees in retail, how their contextual performance would totally vary. I mean, some retail employees would have very low contextual performance. They do not go out of their way to do a special job. They do not engage customers to make customers feel special and welcome and as if they've had a good shopping experience. Some retail employees will not do that, and that's an important part of customer service. Okay, some will go above and beyond to help customers feel special, to really help customers find exactly what they need. So when you're rating a retail employee on performance, you're going to want to look at these contextual performance behaviors, these duties that are hard to measure, that are hard to define, but are really, really important to doing a successful or to doing a good job, to being successful in your role, to doing um, to doing a good job, to doing a good job. So that's one point, that different jobs, some require a lot of contextual behaviors, um, and some require more task than contextual behaviors. So we want to look at both of these things to get an accurate view of the job. And then things like cultural differences and supervisor views. Different supervisors have different views on how employees should perform. Different cultures have different standards for how employees should perform, different cultural norms that influence the performance of employees. So when you look at task and contextual performance, it sort of gives employees more room to how do I explain it? More it might make it a bit more fair to different employees. Maybe if there's an employee trying to adjust to a different culture, or an employee who's trying to fit in with a new supervisor, maybe this employee is very new to the job. So even if they're not doing a great job as far as task performance goes, maybe they have great contextual performance and they're really contributing a lot to the organization outside of what's written in their specific job duties. So you want to look at both task and contextual performance. It's not only task performance that contributes to the success of the organization, it's contextual performance as well, and that needs to be taken into account. All right, voice behavior. Behavior that emphasizes expression of constructive challenge with the goal to improve rather than merely criticize. Okay, so voice behavior is when employees are. It really will only happen when employees feel safe enough to challenge a manager, to challenge a supervisor, to challenge the way that things have always been done. Okay, you're not going to see voice behavior unless employees feel safe enough, feel as if their contribution is actually going to be listened to, feel as though what they say is actually going to make a difference. Okay, when you have all these things, employees will engage in voice behavior, and voice behavior is very, very, very valuable. It's a lot of times big changes to organizations come from those. It doesn't always come from the manager, the supervisor, the executive level. It can sometimes come from those lower level employees who notice a better way of doing things. They speak up, they challenge the way that something has always been done, they challenge the status quo. They make a suggestion, okay? They recommend some kind of modification to how things have always been done. And this brings a lot of value to the organization. So motivating employees to engage in voice behavior um, can be very rewarding if done right. Can be very rewarding if done right. Okay, so let's look at our job performance in context. So look at this little flow chart here. A performer, individual, or team in a given situation engages in certain behaviors that produce various results. So basically what we have here is we start with an employee or a team of employees in a given situation. So the situation is going to influence that individual or team. Remember, we talked about the work environment, whether it be politics or laws or even internal to the organization, the HR practices, the HR system, the culture of the organization. Okay, so the situation is going to influence the performer, the individual or team. Okay, so we now have the traits of that individual or team interacting with the situation. Okay, and that produces certain behaviors. Okay, and certain behaviors are going to be seen, and then those behaviors, whatever they may be, are going to lead to various results. And this is the basic premise of job performance. This is a basic flowchart of how job performance is conceptualized here. Okay. So let's look at the different approaches to measuring performance. Right, we have the behavior approach, the results approach, and the trait approach. So you're going to want to look at the behavior approach if it's going to take a long time for employees to achieve the desired outcome. Okay, if you're just looking at results or you're just looking at employee traits, this might not, that won't be a good way to measure performance if the goal is a long time, if it's a long ways out. Okay, if the goal is in a year and you're having a performance review in 3 months, okay, if you're say you're taking a results-oriented approach, okay, in 3 months maybe nothing has been produced yet because it's going to take 12 months to complete this project. If you're solely looking at results, after 3 months you're going to say, oh, we have no results yet, this employee did a poor job. But if you're evaluating the employee by his or her behavior, you're going to say, okay, we're 3 months in, this employee has been behaving, this employee has been doing what they needed to do so far. The results aren't there yet, but they've been doing what they need to do. So, let's give this employee a positive review because he or she is doing what he needs to do to achieve that 12-month goal. Okay, so when goals are a long ways out, this is when the behavior approach to measuring performance is useful. Okay, or if results are poor, if results end up being poor, the result is not something that was expected. The project was a failure. Okay, so this may be due to forces that are beyond the control of those working on that project. Okay, so it's not fair to judge the employees by the results if they were engaging in behaviors that were appropriate. I'm sure we've all had situations where we've been doing the right thing. We really worked hard on something, did everything right, did everything by the book, did everything how it's supposed to be done, and still the goal wasn't achieved. Something happened in the external environment that totally just derailed the project, and the results were not there. I would say a poor approach to measuring performance, to evaluating performance, would be to say, well, your results were poor, so you all performed poorly. That would be a bad idea. A better idea would be to say, well, the results were poor, but uh, you all behaved, you all did what you were supposed to do, so you actually performed well. I think that would be more appropriate. Okay, so let's talk about the results approach again. So we sort of hit on this already. If it's a short time frame, if results are going to be seen very soon, then certainly a results approach can be taken. There's lower cost in looking at a results approach because studying behavior, recording behavior, gathering enough information on behavior to do a performance assessment or to incorporate it into performance management, that takes a lot of time. That takes a lot of money. So the results approach is quicker and cheaper. Results is also good. Results approach to measuring performance is also good when the data is very objective. Um, okay, it's also good if we want to see how results are improving over time. If we want to look at a progression of results over time, then the result approach to measuring performance might be a good idea. You can't really see how behaviors. I suppose you could see how behaviors improve over time, but it would be a lot less. It would be a lot more difficult to see that. It would be a very subjective approach, and measuring improvement in results would be a lot more objective than measuring improvement in behavior. Okay, it's also appropriate when there's many different ways to do the job right. The results approach is. So when there's many different ways to do the job right, maybe you're a manager and you don't really approve of how your employee is doing the job, but as long as they're not breaking any laws, they're not doing anything unethical, if they achieve the result, then it's all good. You give them a positive review. So that might be another time when results approach is good. So let's look at the trade approach. This one's a bit difficult to understand, and you're rarely going to see a trade approach to measuring performance. It's really only going to be behavior or results. Like we talked about in the beginning of the presentation, most of the time it should be behavior, although a lot of the time it is results because, like we said, it's shorter and cheaper, a bit more objective. Behaviors is generally accepted as the better way to go. The trade approach you're not going to see very often. So with the trade approach, it's appropriate when the emphasis is on the individual, when you're looking at stable traits such as cognitive ability or someone's personality. Okay, and it's appropriate if there's going to be structural changes within the organization. So it's really a preemptive approach to a preemptive evaluation of an employee as it relates to performance. So you're looking at cognitive abilities and personalities and saying, well, this person has a pretty high cognitive ability. They have a personality that's appropriate for this role. So we're going to so it's likely that they'll be a high performer. So let's take that employee and let's incorporate them into our new organizational structure. Okay, so it's really, I guess it could be considered some type of screening approach to measuring performance, some type of like a predictive measure and measuring performance. The trade approach is. Okay, it's really the trade approach in a nutshell. Okay, that's about it. So what did we do here? We defined performance. We looked at the different types of performance. We looked at the different aspects of performance, so that motivation, procedural knowledge, declarative knowledge. Those were the different determinants of performance. We looked at performance dimensions, so how to evaluate, how to measure, different approaches to measuring performance. We looked at job performance in context, so the traits leading, the performer, the individual or the team being influenced by the situation, engaging in certain behaviors will produce certain results. So we looked at that sort of progression of job performance. We also looked at voice behavior and inspiring employees to speak up about certain about any recommendations that they may have to improve the business. Voice behavior is a type of contextual performance that employees can engage in to add value to the organization. So that's about it. As always, any questions, please email me to let me know. And I will see y'all next week.